Now, you just heard the defendant, Christopher Keith Tilley, plead guilty to the offense of murder. Guilty to the offense of murder. Who did he murder? Who did he admit in open court in front of a jury of his peers that he murdered? That's Mr. Del Tilley. Now, despite the defendant's plea of guilty, you as the jury in this case are entitled to, and we are going to show you every bit of evidence, every bit of excruciating evidence that you would have heard otherwise if the defendant had pled not guilty. Because your job as the jury in this case is to decide what is the just punishment for what the defendant has pled guilty to. And that, unfortunately, is going to require you to see every bit of evidence that we have in this case. And the evidence that you will see is excruciating and it is heartbreaking. Because, as you may have guessed by the last name of the defendant and the victim, the man that the defendant has just pled guilty to murdering, Del Tilley, is none other than the defendant's own father. His father, who was 79 years old, a man who his entire life worked to provide for his family, a man who loved his family, a man who loved the defendant, a man who would have and did give everything that he could so that his family would be okay. His wife, all of his children, his grandchildren. That is the sum total of Del Tilley's life. And that is the man who was murdered by the defendant, in this case, his son. What the evidence will show is that on March the 25th of 2024, last year, here in Smith County, the defendant brutally, maliciously, intentionally emptied every bullet he had in his gun into his father, who lived in the house. Well, obviously, Mr. Tilley, Del Tilley, lived in the house. He lived there with his wife, Willie, and his daughter, Dana, and also the defendant, Christopher. You're going to hear about the family dynamic in the home. You're going to hear not only all the evidence of the crime, the horrible crime that the defendant committed in this case, you're going to hear from family members who are going to provide the context, so you have the full picture. But you will not hear from Mrs. Tilley or Dana, and you're going to hear why that is. Neither of them are available to testify, can testify, but you'll hear from a brother, you'll hear from other family members, and they'll explain that. But on March the 25th, 2024, the defendant fired 5 shots into his father. 2 in the chest and torso, those were contact shots. And the remaining 3 that he had in the cylinder, he fired into the head and neck of his dad. You're going to hear medical testimony from the medical examiner who performed the autopsy. You're going to see the crime scene, every bit of the crime scene, the injuries, the gunshot wounds. And then you're also going to see the defendant right after he killed his father. And we're going to ask that you pay special close attention to the defendant and how he's acting. What are his mannerisms in that moment? What is his state of mind? What is his emotional state? And you're going to hear from the defendant himself by way of an interview with the lead detective in this case, Detective Jacob Brown, who sat down with Christopher Tilley that night. Christopher Tilley was read his rights. He waived his rights. He spoke to detectives in this case who just wanted to know, tell us what happened, give us your side of the story. And for about an hour and 15, maybe an hour and 20 minutes, you are going to hear the defendant lie through his teeth. The evidence will show that the defendant said one thing that is incompatible with his plea of guilty today. And it is incompatible, as you will hear from our crime scene investigators, with the physical evidence that was left at the scene. Is that Del Tilley was mean? Was abusive? Ever laid a hand on any of his kids? Or gave anybody, let alone his own son, any reason to brutally shoot him in the face? You will not see or hear one lick of evidence in this trial that would suggest or give you anything to hang your hat on as to why the defendant did what he did. So you will hear every bit of evidence that we have in this case, because you need that as the jury of this defendant's peers to fully weigh his actions and his conduct and what he stole from his own family in order to reach a just conclusion in this case. And I'll tell you right out of the gate that in our view, there is only one just sentence in this case, and that is a life sentence. Because that is the only verdict that comes anywhere close to stacking up to what the defendant did on March the 25th of last year.